Hi and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about number formatters in SwiftUI and how you can format numbers in views and in Swift. If you're ready to learn more, stick around. Let's dive right in. So here we are starting off in our brand new Xcode project. Let's go ahead and create a variable that we can start using for this whole project. So we will create a constant and say that it is an amount. And that amount is going to be 12.3456. And that'll give us just an easy thing that we can utilize to work with in our project. We'll change our VStack to a list. We'll get rid of this padding here, and then we will start off with our first value. So our first value here is just going to be our amount, and then we're going to format it as a number. Just as simple as that. And there we go. There's our first value. Now that's not very cool, except for the fact of without this formatting as a number, the text would be giving us an error saying, hey, you can't pass that. That's a number, not text. But when we tell it that the format of this thing is a number, the text is okay with it and it doesn't throw any errors. Another interesting thing that we can do with this is we could say that we have a text with our amount, and we can format it as a number, and then we can take that number one step farther and we say that we want to round that number. And not only do we want to round it, but we can round it up or down to the nearest increment. So if we said that the rule for this was to round up, for example, and the nearest increment would be 1, then this would round it up to the nearest whole increment, which is very cool. And we could do the same thing, and instead of up, we could say that we wanted to round it down, and that rounds it down to the nearest whole increment. Again, very cool. What if instead of just rounding it to the nearest up or down to the nearest whole increment, we wanted to round it to say like the nearest 10 or the nearest tenth? How would we do that? So let's go over that. Let's look and let's say we have an amount, we have a format. In this format we're going to take a number and we're going to say that we are rounding it, and the increment that we're going to use is 10, and so that'll round our value to the nearest 10. But what if we wanted to round it to instead the nearest tenth? So we could say 0.1. And now, as you can see, it's rounding it to the nearest tenth instead of the nearest 10. What if we wanted to instead round it to the nearest 100? We could do that too. We could say that we want to round it to the nearest 100. And 0 is closer to 12 than 100 is, so it rounds it down to 0. Pretty cool. Now we can also do something very similar to this with the precision API. And so we could say format as a number and say that we wanted to use a precision. Now in here we would pass a fraction length, and our fraction length would be 0, for example, to get us to the nearest whole number. And if we wanted to do the nearest tenth, for example, we could say our fraction length is 1, and that would give us to the nearest tenth. Now, like most things in development, you can usually do something in more than just one way. However, there's always trade-offs with everything that you do. For example, this to me reads very easily that we're going to round this number to the nearest 10 or to the nearest 1/10 or even to the nearest 100. Like, to me, this reads very simply and very easily, and I don't have to think too much about what's going on here. Whereas when I use the precision increment, it doesn't exactly read very cleanly, or at least as cleanly in my opinion, as the rounded option does. And so that's the trade-off. While yes, you can use these, it may not be as easy for other developers to read. And same goes for when you're seeing this in someone else's code. If you see precision and a fraction length, that may make more sense to them. And so just have that conversation when you see those kinds of things with your fellow team members. For example, they may not even know that the rounded option exists, or may not have even looked to figure out if that exists. That may just be all that's going on there. And now that's not all we can do. So let's go ahead and let's do some more stuff. What if we had a really large number? Instead of a decimal, we had just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We could say that we want a dot number, and then we want to choose our decimal separator strategy. And this is pretty cool because we could say we always want to see a decimal. And as you can see, it's got a comma separator here and a decimal, even though there's no other value after the decimal. And if you've ever dealt with accounting or spreadsheets, you've probably seen that they usually like to have a plus and minus on a value just to make things extra clear. So how could we do that? We could say that we have a value of our amount and a format of a number, and that number has a sign strategy that we will use, and we could say always and include zeros is true. There we go. And so even though our number is positive, this just makes it extra clear. And just for clarity's sake, let's look and see what that does here. So we could say text, and the value that we want to display is a 0. We want a number with a sign strategy of always including 0 of true. And as you can see, even with 0, we've got a 0 and positive. Now, I don't know about you, but I always like to see a decimal separator. However, if you're not one of those people, you can come in here and we'll use another large number, and we'll pass a format with a number, and we can tell it to group in a certain way. And the grouping, for example, is never. And that will get rid of any of the comma values in our number. Again, that makes it way harder to read in my opinion, but that may be exactly what you're looking for in your app. And same thing here, we can come back and we could say that 6, 7, 8, 9, that we have again our number. Oops, missed a 6 there. There we go. And we have our format as a number with the grouping of automatic. And that again gives us back our comma value here. It makes it a little bit easier to read. So what if you're working on another really large number, say the same number that we have here, and we want to display that, but we want to display it as a large piece of text, like 123K, for example. How would we do that? So we could say that we have a format, and in that format we want a number, and we want to change the notation. And so our notation in this scenario is going to be compact, and that gives us 123K instead of showing all of the specifics about that number. This would be great for something like if you were using a giant billboard to show just super high level numbers. This is the kind of thing that you're going to be looking for in that scenario. Or in the other scenario, if you're looking for super precision instead of a high level number, we can say that our notation is scientific. And that gives us back all of the super specific number details in a scientific format. Again, that may not always be what you need, but it's good to know that you've got it. Now we can also take these modifiers and combine them. So for example, if we had a really large number, we could say that we wanted to format it as a number with a notation of compact to get us the 123 million, and then we could take that and say that we wanted our precision to be a significant digit of 2. So that would just give us 2 significant digits and get rid of that third digit because we've told it that we don't care about that third digit, that it's insignificant. And that's another way to give yourself even more ways to display customized text. Now, I prefer to leave the formatting in the view layer itself because that allows me to test with the raw data in my unit test and that kind of thing. But not everyone agrees. And so what about those folks that they like being able to send the data from the view model, for example, into the view already formatted, and they like to be able to unit test that kind of thing? How would we do that? Well, we can do similar things to what we've done here in our view in a view model. So let's go back over here and let's say we want to create a new Swift file, and we'll call this our view model. And this is a class of view model. There we go. And now if we wanted just, for example, a function here called format numbers, and we don't want it to return a string, we just want to print stuff for now. So we can do things even in just Foundation without even SwiftUI. So if, for example, you are doing a coding challenge, you can use this kind of stuff in your Swift language, assuming that the platform you're using actually has a reasonably updated version of Swift, which not all of them do. So let's start by creating the same value that we did over in our view, and let's say that our amount is equal to 123.456. There we go. And now let's go ahead and just try to format this as a number and see what that looks like. So we will print our amount dot formatted, and the format that we will use is dot number. So before we run this on our project, let's go back to our view and let's add our view model to our view, and then we will add an onAppear, and in that onAppear we will say that we want to run our format number method. There we go. All right, and now we're ready to run this and see what gets printed out here. There we go. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, just like we expected. And it looks like that decimal was actually scooted over one spot, so let's go back and fix that. And let's rerun our app. And there we go, 1.2.3456. All right. Now let's go and back to our view model and let's see what else we could do. Again, same thing. If we want to take our amount and we can format it, and we can format it as a number, and we can do our same rounding rules. And if you have this selected here and you see that these are grayed out, which means that they won't be placed into the code whenever you hit enter, you can hit Option Enter, and then that automatically will throw those in there. So we will say that we want to round this up, and we want it to be rounded up to 1. And the same thing, we'll copy this here, and then we can round it, instead of up, we can round it down, and then rerun our code. And now we can see that it is 13 and 12, just like we had over here on our other view. So as you can see, all of these methods that we have been creating in our view also work in just Swift itself. So let's do one more, and we will say print our amount dot number, dot formatted dot number dot rounded, and the increment is 10. There we go. And rerun our code. And as you can see, we've got 12, 13, 12, 12, 13, 12, 10, just like we did on our view. Now, you've probably figured out by now, so I won't keep going through this, that the method calls for just Swift itself is a number dot formatted instead of what it was in our view, which was a number in our text, comma, and then format. That's really the only difference, because we can still pass in whatever formatters that we want inside of our formatted extension. And with that, feel free to like, subscribe, and share, and leave a comment. Just be nice about it, that's all I ask. Thanks, have a great day.